Two little sisters sat in the rain, outside a glowing mall, clutching one worn blue backpack. Then the older girl whispered a question no child should ever ask if nobody picks us. Where do kids like us belong? One man stopped, and everything changed. The rain didn't fall. It pressed. Cold, steady, relentless, like the city was asking everyone to hurry up and disappear. Outside the glass doors of Harbor Light Galleria, on a narrow strip of concrete that stayed barely dry beneath the awning, two little girls sat shoulder to shoulder. The older one, Ivy Lane, 6 years old, sat upright with her back straight, as if posture alone could make her smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. Her arm curved protectively around her younger sister, Ren, 5, who leaned into her side like gravity had chosen Ivy as the safest place in the world. Between them rested a faded sky blue backpack. The zipper was stiff. One strap had been knotted back together. Ivy hugged it with both arms, not like a bag, but like an address. Each time the automatic doors slid open, warm air spilled out, brushing their cheeks with the scent of coffee and new clothes. Each time the doors closed, the cold returned sharper, meaner, reminding them where they were allowed to exist. People passed. Shoes clicked. Shopping bags swung. Laughter escaped briefly before being swallowed by rain and glass. No one stopped. Ren's fingers twitched against Ivy's sleeve. "Is it almost over?" she whispered, not asking what, just when. Ivy didn't answer right away. She watched the reflection of their shoes in the polished stone. Small, still, out of place. Then, in a voice so soft it barely survived the rain, Ivy whispered the question she had been holding all day. "If nobody picks us?" Her throat tightened. She swallowed. "Where do kids like us go?" The words didn't echo. They didn't bounce back. They just stayed there on the cold concrete, waiting for someone to hear them. A security guard noticed them when the doors opened for the 4th time in less than a minute. Not because they were loud, not because they were causing trouble, but because two children sitting alone in a place like this was something the system didn't know how to file neatly. He approached slowly, rain darkening the shoulders of his uniform. His expression wasn't angry, just tired, practiced, careful. "Hey, sweethearts," he said gently, stopping a few feet away. "You can't sit here. We need to keep the entrance clear." Ivy nodded immediately. She always nodded. Nodding kept things calm. "We'll move," she said quietly. Ren stiffened her small hand, clutching the fabric of Ivy's jacket. Ivy scooted them sideways inch by inch, trying to fold their bodies into less space. The backpack scraped softly against the concrete. The guard exhaled and reached toward his radio. Not to threaten, just to follow procedure. "I'm gonna need to call this in," he said. "Okay." The word call landed heavy. Ren leaned closer, her forehead pressing into Ivy's arm. "Ivy," she whispered, barely sound at all. "Are we in trouble?" Ivy shook her head, though she wasn't sure. "No," she said. "We're just, in the wrong place." The doors hissed again. Laughter spilled out. Warmth followed. A woman stepped around them without slowing down. A man frowned, annoyed that children were sitting where children didn't belong. Ivy squeezed the backpack tighter. Then footsteps stopped. Not hurried, not impatient. Still. The guard looked up surprised as a man stepped off the curb without glancing at traffic rain soaking into the dark wool of his coat. "Hold on," the man said calmly. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The black sedan idled at the curb, its rear door still open, the driver frozen mid-motion. The man crossing the street moved with unhurried certainty, like someone who had spent a lifetime being listened to without raising his voice. Rain slid from his shoulders, darkening the fabric of his coat. Rowan Cade, 41. CEO, but none of that mattered here. What mattered was that he had heard a question and chosen not to walk past it. "She's not blocking anything," Rowan said quietly, his gaze steady on the guard. "And they're not hurting anyone." The guard hesitated. Recognition flickered across his face, not fear, just awareness. He stepped back half a pace, unsure how to argue with authority that wasn't aggressive. Rowan didn't wait. He crouched down in front of the girls, slow and deliberate, keeping space between them. From this close, they looked even smaller than they had from across the street. Ivy's shoes were thin, damp at the edges. Wren's lashes clumped together from the rain. Both girls watched him carefully, like animals deciding whether to run. "Hey," Rowan said gently. "It's cold out here." Ivy studied his shoes, his hands, his face. Then she lifted her eyes. "If nobody picks us," she said again, steadier this time, "where do kids like us go?" Rowan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He had answered questions worth billions without blinking. He had stood in front of cameras and spoken about growth, stability, futures. But here on wet concrete under fluorescent mall lights, there was no script. Wren leaned into Ivy, whispering, "Is he going to go away?" Rowan heard that too. Slowly he shrugged off his coat and draped it over both girls, careful not to startle them. It covered Ivy's shoulders and wrapped around Wren like a shared blanket. "I'm not taking anything," he said softly. "I just want you to be warm." For the first time that night, neither girl pulled away. The coat was heavier than Ivy expected. Not heavy like armor, heavy like something meant to stay. It draped over both girls, the sleeves hanging past Wren's hands, the hem brushing Ivy's knees. Warmth seeped in slowly, the kind that didn't shock the body into panic. Wren exhaled. A long, shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Rowan stayed crouched. He didn't reach again. He didn't hurry them. He simply stayed where he was, making space feel safer by not filling it. "Do you have someone inside?" he asked. "A parent, an aunt, anyone you're waiting for?" Ivy shook her head once. "Is there someone I could call for you?" Another shake, smaller this time. The rain pressed harder against the awning. The doors behind them sighed open and shut, spilling warmth that didn't last. Rowan glanced back at the entrance, then returned his focus to the girls. "It's warmer inside," he said. "You don't have to stay out here. Just for a minute." Ivy didn't answer. She had learned that minutes could stretch into hours and then into something worse. She looked down at the backpack, tightening her grip, grounding herself in its familiar weight. Wren reached out first. Not to Rowan's hand, just to the edge of his coat, pinching the fabric between her fingers, as if testing whether it was real. "It's okay," Rowan said softly, noticing. "I'm not asking you to give me anything." Ivy studied his face again, searching for impatience, for the moment kindness usually turned into expectation. It didn't come. She nodded once. "Just a minute," she said carefully. Rowan stood and offered his hand, not taking, only offering. Ivy didn't take it. She stepped forward on her own, guiding Wren beside her. Together they crossed the threshold. The warmth hit Wren first. She gasped softly, eyes widening, as heated air rushed over her face, carrying the smells of cinnamon coffee, and something new she didn't have a name for. The noise inside the mall wrapped around them, music, voices, footsteps bright and careless. Ivy stopped just past the doors. Her body stiffened, as if warmth itself might be a trick. She tightened her hold on the backpack, anchoring herself before the world could tilt again. Rowan noticed and slowed immediately. He didn't touch her. He didn't rush. He simply matched her pace until the tension in her shoulders eased enough for her to take another step. Families passed by. Children tugged at sleeves. Parents laughed, scolded, gently promised snacks or toys. Every child seemed to know exactly where they were going. Wren watched them with open curiosity. "They know," she whispered. "They all know. Know what?" Rowan asked. "Where they belong." The words landed heavier than she meant them to. They passed a large poster mounted above a kiosk, smiling parents, two kids between them, arms linked. Bold letters floated overhead. Home, security, future. Ivy stopped. She stared at the image for a long time. Her head tilted slightly, like she was studying a language she didn't speak. How come, she asked quietly, they don't look lost? Rowan followed her gaze. Something tightened in his chest. Sometimes, he said carefully, people forget how much practice that takes. They kept walking until the smell of warm bread pulled Wren's attention toward a small cafe tucked into the corner. Her stomach made a small traitorous sound. She froze, embarrassed. Rowan smiled gently. That happens to everyone, he said, and turned toward the counter. Rowan ordered warm milk and 2 butter rolls. The cashier smiled, and without a word slid 2 small cookies onto the tray. Ivy stepped back instantly. Her shoulders rose, eyes darting. We can't, she said quickly. We don't have. It's okay, Rowan said calmly, meeting the cashier's eyes so Ivy didn't have to. They're gifts. The word gift hovered unfamiliar and risky. They sat at a small table near the window. Ivy didn't eat right away. She broke off a piece of her roll no bigger than a crumb and tasted it cautiously, like she was checking for danger. Wren copied her, watching Ivy's face for signals. Only when nothing bad happened did they take another bite. Halfway through, Ivy paused, looked around, then carefully slid a part of her roll into the backpack and zipped it shut. Not hiding, saving. Rowan looked away, blinking slowly. From the corner of the cafe, the security guard watched, pretending to adjust his radio. He didn't interrupt, but his presence was felt. Ivy noticed immediately. Her shoulders hunched, and she turned slightly, angling the backpack between herself and the room. Rowan noticed too. You don't have to hurry, he said quietly. No one's taking it. Ivy nodded, though her fingers still hovered protectively over the zipper. The guard approached, polite but firm. Sir Mall policy requires that unattended minors. They're with me, Rowan said calmly. I'm responsible for them right now. The guard hesitated, then stepped back. Wren looked up at Rowan, eyes wide. You didn't let them take us, Rowan shook his head. No. Ivy watched him for a long moment, then whispered something she hadn't planned to say. We'll try to be good. Rowan's chest tightened. You already are, he said gently. And for the first time, Ivy didn't argue. The cafe noise softened into a background hum, but the tension at the table sharpened. Ivy felt it before she understood it, the subtle shift in the air when adults started using careful voices. She didn't look up right away. She focused on the backpack zipper beneath her fingers, the steady ridges grounding her. Rowan remained relaxed, but alert. He had learned long ago that calm was louder than confidence. The security guard returned this time with a woman in a navy blazer and a lanyard badge clipped neatly at her side. She didn't look stern. She looked prepared. Hi, the woman said gently, kneeling a few steps away. My name is Marin Shaw. I help make sure kids are safe when things get confusing. Wren's chair scraped softly as she pressed closer to Ivy. Ivy lifted her chin. We're not breaking anything, she said quickly. We're almost done. Marin smiled, slow, sincere. I know. You're doing a very good job. That wasn't the answer Ivy expected. She hesitated, unsure what to do with praise that didn't come with instructions. Marin turned her attention to Rowan. Sir, thank you for staying with them. Because they don't have a guardian present, protocol says we need to check in and make sure they have a safe place tonight. The word protocol landed heavy, even if Ivy didn't know what it meant. She only knew that it sounded permanent. Wren whispered, I don't want to sleep where it's loud. Rowan didn't rush to answer. He leaned slightly toward the girls so they could hear him clearly. No one is deciding anything without explaining it. First, he said, and I'm not going anywhere. Marin noticed the way Ivy's shoulders lowered at those words. Can we talk for a minute? Marin asked the girls. Just names, ages, that's all. Ivy nodded carefully. Ivy Lane, I'm 6. Wren, her sister, added, I'm 5. Marin wrote them down slowly, deliberately, as if time mattered. And right now, Marin said, meeting Ivy's eyes, you're safe. Ivy held that sentence quietly, testing its weight. The mall grew quieter as evening settled in. Metal gates rattled down in front of stores. The music softened like it was preparing to sleep. Marin explained the next steps without hurry. A licensed family shelter, warm beds, dinner if they wanted it, just for the night while things were sorted out. Ivy listened without interrupting. She didn't ask why. She asked the only question that mattered. Will we be together? Yes, Marin answered immediately. Always. Ren relaxed enough to yawn, then quickly covered her mouth, embarrassed. Rowan walked with them to the exit. Rain streaked the glass doors again, but this time the cold felt different, temporary. I can follow you, Rowan said to Marin. Not interfere, just stay close. Marin studied him for a moment, then nodded. That would help. In the car, the heater hummed softly. Ren pressed her palms to the vent, eyes widening at the warmth. Ivy sat upright, the backpack secured on her lap seatbelt, crossing it like a promise. Rowan drove carefully, leaving just enough space between his car and Marin's to be visible without crowding. At a red light, Ren leaned forward between the seats. You're still there? She said, more statement than question. Rowan smiled in the rearview mirror. I am. He turned the radio on low, instrumental, no words, to demand attention. The city thinned into quieter streets, streetlights stretching reflections across wet pavement. The shelter appeared ahead, modest, and well-lit paper stars taped unevenly to the windows. It didn't look like a place where people disappeared. It looked like a place where people rested. It smells like soap, Ren whispered. And food, Ivy added, surprised. Rowan parked and stepped out first, holding his coat over them as they walked inside. Ivy stayed close, not clinging, just making sure he was still real. Inside, children slept curled under blankets. No shouting, no rush. Ivy slowed eyes, scanning. They're not holding bags, she whispered. Rowan knelt beside her. They don't need to right now. She nodded, absorbing that possibility. The intake room was small and softly painted with 2 chairs that were slightly too big for Ivy's feet to touch the floor. Ren sat sideways, legs tucked under her, leaning into Ivy's shoulder. Marin spoke gently, asking only what was necessary. Do you have somewhere warm to go tonight besides here? Ivy shook her head. Someone who's expecting you, another shake. The answers stayed simple. Honest. Safe. Rowan stood nearby, not looming, not distant, present. He watched Ivy carefully, the way she answered without emotion, like she was managing herself instead of being a child. When the questions paused, Ivy looked up at him. Are you leaving now? She asked. The room went still. Rowan didn't answer right away, not because he didn't know, but because he understood the weight of the moment. Promises he knew could shape entire lives. No, he said finally. I'm staying. Not I'll try. Not for a bit. Staying. Ren let out a breath that sounded like relief she didn't know she was holding. Ivy's fingers loosened slightly around the backpack strap. Marin noticed. She closed her folder quietly. We'll take this one step at a time, she said. There's no rush tonight. Later, as the hallway lights dimmed, Ivy and Ren sat on a small bed together, blankets tucked carefully around them. The backpack rested between them, not clutched, just close. Rowan stood in the doorway. Ren's eyes fluttered. You'll come back, she murmured. Rowan nodded without hesitation. In the morning. And after that. Ivy studied his face one last time, searching for cracks. She didn't find any. When the door closed gently behind him, the room stayed warm. The night stayed quiet. And for the first time in a long while, the girls didn't feel like they had to disappear before morning. Night settled over the shelter without ceremony. Lights dimmed. Footsteps softened. Somewhere down the hall, a child laughed in their sleep and then went quiet again. The building breathed differently at night, slower, gentler, like it knew the weight of the day it had carried. Ivy sat upright on the edge of the small bed blanket pulled neatly over her knees. She wasn't cold. She just didn't trust sleep yet. Wren lay curled beside her, already drifting, one small hand resting against Ivy's arm as if anchoring herself there. The backpack sat between them, not hugged, not hidden, just present. Marin returned quietly with a clipboard tucked against her side. "You did really well tonight," she said softly, keeping her voice low enough not to disturb Wren. Ivy nodded. Compliments still felt like something that could be taken back. "We'll let you rest," Marin continued. "Tomorrow we'll ask a few more questions, just enough to understand how to help." Ivy's fingers tightened for a moment. "We don't have to answer everything, right?" "No," Marin said immediately. "Only what you're ready for." That mattered. Across the hall, Rowan leaned against the wall, jacket folded over his arm, tie loosened for the first time all day. He hadn't left, not even to make a call. His phone buzzed twice in his pocket. He ignored it. Marin stepped out to join him. "They keep checking for you," she said quietly, "especially the older one." Rowan nodded, eyes fixed on the doorway. "I'll stay as long as I'm allowed." "Well," Marin said gently, "that's not nothing." Hours passed differently here, not faster or slower, just heavier. Near midnight, Wren stirred, mumbling something Ivy couldn't catch. Ivy leaned closer, whispering reassurance, even though she didn't know what she was reassuring her of. Eventually, exhaustion won. Ivy's head dipped forward, then rested carefully against the pillow. Her hand remained close to the backpack strap, not gripping it, just touching like proof. Rowan shifted closer to the door, listening until her breathing evened out. For the first time that day, he let himself feel the truth settle in. This wasn't charity. This was a line he had crossed, and the night wasn't going to let him step back over it. Morning arrived quietly. No alarms, no rush. Just the soft clink of dishes in the kitchen and the hum of heat pushing into corners that had known too much cold. Ivy woke before Wren. She lay still for a moment, cataloging the room the way she always did, the door window light, backpack. Everything was where it had been when she fell asleep. That mattered. At 8:17 a.m., Rowan returned. He wasn't carrying a briefcase. He wasn't on his phone. In his hands was a small paper bag. Ivy sat up instantly. Rowan crouched beside the bed. "Good morning," he said gently. Inside the bag was a warm blueberry muffin. Steam curled into the air. Wren blinked awake and smiled sleepily before remembering herself. "It's just for you," Rowan said. "You don't have to hurry." Ivy broke off a small piece, tasted it, then another. Halfway through, she folded the rest carefully into the bag and slipped it into the backpack. Rowan didn't comment. Later that morning, Marin motioned Rowan aside. Her expression was calm but intent. "I pulled their preliminary records," she said. "There's something you should see." They sat at a small table in the administrative office. Marin slid a thin folder across the surface. 2 names, 2 birth dates, and 1 familiar notation. Rowan's breath slowed as he read. A foundation reference. An old aid application flagged incomplete. No follow-up documented. His foundation. His signature at the bottom of the policy revision that had quietly closed that door years ago. Marin watched him carefully. "It may not mean what it looks like," she said, "but it's enough to warrant a closer look at their last address." Rowan nodded, throat tight. "I need to see it," he said. "Where they lived before." Marin agreed. "This afternoon." "They'll stay here." In the playroom, Ivy sat at a low table, tracing circles on a piece of paper. When Rowan approached, she looked up immediately. "You're not leaving?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not today." She returned to her drawing, but the circles shook less this time. The apartment sat between a shuttered laundromat and a tire shop with a flickering sign. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shocking. It was tired. Paint peeled along the railing. The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and old soap. Each step groaned as if remembering people who no longer climbed them. Maren unlocked the door with a key the building manager had kept. Inside, the apartment felt paused, not abandoned. A thin mattress lay on the floor near the window, blankets folded with careful precision. A chipped mug sat beside an unplugged kettle. A broken lamp leaned against the wall cord, neatly wrapped as if someone meant to fix it. Rowan took a step inside and stopped. On the wall above the mattress, taped carefully with yellowed tape, was a child's drawing. Two small figures holding hands, and between them, colored in uneven blue strokes, a backpack. Maren swallowed. "We believe Ivy drew this." Rowan's chest tightened. In a small cabinet, Maren found a box of papers, medical bills, overdue notices forms, filled out in neat, hopeful handwriting. Near the bottom lay an envelope creased and worn with words written carefully across the front. "If anyone kind finds this." Maren handed it to Rowan. He opened it slowly. The letter wasn't angry. It wasn't desperate. It was precise, loving, exhausted. It spoke of working late, of keeping routines for two little girls, of teaching them to stay together and hold on to what mattered. It mentioned the foundation by name, not as accusation, but as hope. Rowan read it once, then again. When he finished, the room felt smaller, heavier. "I should have known," he said quietly. Maren shook her head. "You couldn't have known who, but you knew someone." Rowan folded the letter carefully and held it against his chest. Outside, traffic passed. Life continued. But somewhere between the shelter hallway and this silent room, Rowan Cade understood the truth he could no longer ignore. He hadn't just found two children. He had been found. They returned to the shelter just before sunset. The sky outside had turned the color of bruised silver rain, threatening but not yet falling. Inside, the building hummed with evening routines. Chairs scraping softly, voices low, the smell of warm food drifting down the hall. Ivy sat on the carpet near a low bookshelf, legs tucked neatly beneath her. The backpack rested upright on her lap. Zipper closed, her hands folded over it, like a promise. She wasn't playing. She never played when she was waiting. Wren sat beside her, coloring carefully within the lines of a house she'd drawn again and again. Two windows, one door, no cracks. When Rowan stepped inside, Ivy looked up instantly. Her face didn't brighten. It softened. That was enough. Rowan crossed the room slowly and knelt in front of them, bringing himself to their level. He didn't speak right away. He let the silence settle until it felt safe. "I went to see where your mom lived," he said gently. Ivy's fingers tightened around the backpack. "Not fear, attention. She tried very hard," Rowan continued. "She loved you both very much." Ivy didn't cry. She nodded once, eyes steady as if she had already known that part. "She left something," Rowan said. "A letter." Wren looked up. "Like?" "For us," Rowan shook his head slightly. "For someone kind enough to help. I read a copy." Ivy swallowed. Her hand moved slowly to the zipper. For a moment she hesitated, then opened the backpack and reached inside. She pulled out the envelope wrapped carefully in tissue edges, worn from being folded and unfolded. She held it with both hands. "The real one is here," she said quietly. "Mom said not to lose it." Rowan accepted it as if it were something fragile, sacred. He didn't read it again. He didn't need to. Instead, he looked at Ivy. "I need to tell you something honest," he said. "A long time ago, I made a decision that stopped help from reaching your mom when she needed it. I didn't know it was her, but I knew it was someone." Ivy listened closely, not like a child being lectured, but like someone weighing truth. "I can't change that," Rowan continued, "but I can change what happens next." Wren leaned into Ivy's side. "Does that mean we did something wrong?" "No," Rowan said immediately. "None of this is because of you." Ivy studied his face for a long moment. Then she asked the question that mattered. Are we going back? The room seemed to hold its breath. No, Rowan said. You're not. Ivy's shoulders sagged just a little, like something heavy had finally been set down. From across the room, Maren watched quietly, knowing she was witnessing a moment that could not be undone. Later that evening, Maren asked Rowan to step into the office. Her tone was calm, professional, grounded. I need to be very clear about what comes next, she said. If you're considering long-term care, there are legal steps. Background checks, hearings, public records. Rowan nodded. I understand. This won't stay private, Maren added. People will question your motives. Rowan didn't flinch. They already do. Maren studied him carefully. Why are you doing this? Rowan thought of boardrooms and policies, of words like impact and sustainability. Then he thought of Ivy's hands on the backpack and Wren's careful houses. Because they shouldn't have to earn safety, he said. Maren closed her folder slowly. Then we begin tomorrow. Back in the common room, Ivy and Wren sat together on the couch, sharing a blanket. The backpack lay between them, not clutched, just present. Maren knelt in front of them. We're going to ask some grown-up questions in the morning, she said gently. You don't have to know the answers. You just have to tell the truth. Wren frowned. What if the truth makes people mad? Maren smiled softly. Then that's the grown-up's job to handle. Ivy looked at Rowan. Will you be there? Yes, he said without hesitation. Every part. That night, Ivy slept lying down, for the first time, the backpack beside her pillow instead of under her arms. Wren curled toward her, breathing slow and even. Rowan sat in a chair near the door, lights, dim phone buzzing silently in his pocket. He didn't answer it. In the quiet, he realized something that surprised him. This didn't feel like rescue. It felt like alignment. In the morning, the county building smelled like old carpet and coffee. The hearing room was smaller than Rowan expected. No drama, no spectacle. Just desks arranged in a half circle and people doing careful work. Ivy sat tall in her chair, feet dangling. Wren's legs swung gently, brushing Ivy's ankle for reassurance. When asked where they wanted to stay, Ivy didn't answer right away. She climbed down from her chair, walked to Rowan, and placed her hand on his knee. Here, she said quietly, with him. Wren nodded hard. Together. No one rushed them. No one interrupted. The decision came carefully, formally. Temporary guardianship granted. Path toward permanency approved. Ivy didn't smile. She exhaled. Rowan's house felt different than the shelter. Not bigger, not louder, just steady. Sunlight filtered through wide windows. The air smelled clean, warm, unhurried. Rowan moved slowly, explaining everything, as if the house itself might be listening. This is the kitchen, he said. Food is always here. You don't have to ask. Wren touched the counter, eyes wide. Even snacks, especially snacks, Rowan said. Upstairs, 2 small rooms waited. Nothing extravagant. Beds made neatly. Nightlights shaped like stars. Blankets folded, not tucked, leaving choices open. Ivy stepped inside her room and turned in a slow circle. This is really ours, she asked. Yes, Rowan said, for as long as you want. She placed the backpack on the bed, not at the edge, not hidden. On top. Then she climbed up beside it, testing the mattress with cautious trust. That night, as Rowan tucked them in, Wren hesitated. If we mess up, she asked, do we have to leave? Rowan shook his head. No one leaves because they're learning. Ivy watched him carefully. And if we're quiet, Rowan smiled gently. You don't have to be. Later, as the house settled into silence, Rowan stood in the doorway longer than necessary, listening to their breathing. Not shallow, not rushed. Just sleep. Down the hall, his phone buzzed again, board members, investors, questions waiting to be asked. He silenced it, because in this house, 2 little girls slept without guarding their hearts. And for the first time in his life, Rowan Cade understood something clearly. A child does not belong to money. A child does not belong to systems. A child belongs where she is chosen and where she is allowed to stay. The first morning in Rowan's house didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a test. Not because anything went wrong, nothing did. The house was quiet. The light was soft. The heat hummed steadily through vents like a gentle promise. But Ivy moved through the rooms as if she were walking on thin ice. Wren followed her half a step behind, eyes wide and curious, but careful not to touch too much too fast. Rowan didn't try to make the morning perfect. He made it simple. Oatmeal, fruit, warm milk, a choice of 2 cups, one with a star, one with a moon. He placed both on the table and let the girls decide without instruction. Wren picked the moon. Ivy hesitated longer, then chose the star as if she needed proof that choosing was allowed. The backpack leaned against Ivy's chair leg, not on her lap, not hugged, just close enough to reach. Rowan sat across from them, phone face down, silent. He watched Ivy's shoulders rise and fall the way she saved half her spoonful, paused, then continued, an old habit trying to survive in a new place. "It's not bad," Wren asked, suddenly staring into her bowl. Rowan knew what she meant. Not the oatmeal, the house, the staying. "No," he said gently. "It's not bad." Wren nodded like she was filing the answer away for later. Ivy didn't look up. "People get mad when things change," she said quietly. Rowan's chest tightened. He recognized the sentence. It sounded like something a child learns when adults talk around them instead of to them. "Yes," Rowan admitted. "Some people do." As if summoned by her words, the world knocked. Not on the door on his phone. It buzzed once, then again, then again. A message from his assistant. A voicemail from legal counsel. Another from the board. Then a text from the communications director that read like a warning wrapped in politeness. Rowan didn't check any of it. Not yet. Because across the table, Ivy's hand had drifted to the backpack strap again, fingers curling around it without fully gripping. Her eyes flicked up, small, fast, measuring. Rowan met her gaze and kept his voice steady. "No one is coming here to take you," he said softly. Ivy stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Wren whispered almost to herself. "He talks like a door that locks." Rowan smiled faintly. "That's a good thing." Later, Maren arrived for a scheduled home visit, standard lawful calm. She came alone, badge, visible, shoes wiped at the mat. She greeted the girls like they mattered more than paperwork. "Hi, Ivy." "Hi, Wren," she said warmly. "I'm here to make sure you're comfortable and safe." Wren offered her the moon cup, as if sharing was a peace treaty. Maren accepted it with exaggerated gratitude, making Wren giggle once, one small sound of real childhood. Ivy didn't giggle. She watched. Maren sat with Rowan afterward, voice low, practical. "The hearing granted temporary guardianship. That doesn't stop people from talking." Rowan nodded. "I expected that. It's already circulating," Maren said, sliding her phone across the counter so Rowan could see one headline: "CEO takes custody of 2 sisters." Questions raised. Rowan's jaw tightened, not with anger focus. Maren's eyes stayed kind, but firm. "You can't control what they say. You can control what you do." Rowan nodded slowly. "Then I'll do the right thing," louder. That afternoon, the board called an emergency meeting. Rowan went not because he feared them, but because he refused to hide. Before leaving, he crouched beside the girls in the living room. "I'm going to a meeting," he told them, plain and honest. "I'll be back." Wren's face pinched. "Meetings take people away." Rowan shook his head. "Not from you." Ivy's voice was quiet, razor thin. "If they tell you to stop," Rowan held her gaze, "then they'll learn I don't stop when kids need a safe place." He stood. Ivy didn't reach for his sleeve. She didn't ask him to promise again. She just watched him walk to the door. And for the first time, Rowan understood the real cost of the day ahead. It wasn't money. It wasn't reputation. It was whether he could prove over and over in 1,000 small moments that staying wasn't something he did once. It was who he chose to be. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and quiet power. A long table, a wall of windows, a view of the city that made people feel untouchable. On any other day, Rowan would have walked in with a folder of forecasts and a calm voice that turned conflict into consensus. Today he walked in with something heavier than numbers. Commitment. Dax Holloway sat near the center hand-steepled expression, carefully neutral. Around him, other board members shifted in their seats, some concerned, some curious, some already annoyed. Rowan took his seat without ceremony. Dax spoke first. "This is unexpected." "That's one word," Rowan said calmly. A woman in a gray suit slid a tablet across the table. "Media coverage is escalating. Investors are calling. They want to know if this is a distraction, a liability." Rowan listened, face still, hands folded. He let them speak until the room ran out of momentum. Then he said quietly, "2 children were sitting outside in the rain. They asked where kids like them belong. I didn't have an answer, so I chose to become one." The room went silent, not because they were moved, but because they weren't sure what to do with sincerity. Dax cleared his throat. "Rowan, no one is questioning compassion. We're questioning judgment. You're the CEO. You can't tie personal decisions to corporate stability." Rowan's gaze sharpened slightly. "Our stability has been tied to personal decisions for years. We just call them policy." Dax's lips pressed together. "This is not the same." Rowan leaned forward. "It's exactly the same. The difference is the outcome has names now." He slid a single sheet onto the table, no dramatics, just facts. "I reviewed our foundation's aid program. Years ago, we streamlined it. We reduced access for part-time workers. We delayed response times. We optimized the human out of it." A few board members shifted. Rowan continued, voice steady. "That decision didn't just affect numbers. It affected lives. I signed off on it, and I'm correcting it." Dax frowned. "You're proposing reinstating benefits, expanding oversight publicly." "Yes," Rowan said, immediately. A board member across the table raised a hand. "That's millions." Rowan nodded. "It is. And you're doing this because of," Dax gestured vaguely, not cruelly, but carefully, "this situation." Rowan's voice lowered. "I'm doing this because it was wrong. The fact that I finally saw the consequences doesn't make it less wrong." Silence again, this time uncomfortable. Then Dax said, "You understand the optics. A CEO taking custody of 2 children. People will suspect motives." Rowan didn't flinch. "Let them. That's easy to say," Dax replied. "Not easy to live with." Rowan's eyes held. "I didn't do this because it's easy." He paused, then added, "And I won't use the children to clean my image. There will be no photos, no press statements with their faces, no feel-good campaign. Their privacy is not currency." That landed. A woman at the end of the table softened slightly. "Then what do you want from us?" Rowan exhaled, once controlled. "I want us to become the company we claim to be. I want the aid program rebuilt with accountability. I want response guarantees and an independent review board. I want it done quietly and correctly because it's right." Dax tilted his head. "And if we refuse," Rowan didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply told the truth. "Then you can start the process to replace me," he said. "Because I won't lead a company that calls children statistics while writing values on the wall." The air in the room changed. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Permanent. A board member whispered to another. Someone tapped a pen, then stopped. The legal counsel's eyes moved between faces, calculating. Dax stared at Rowan for a long moment. Finally, he leaned back. "You're serious?" Rowan nodded. "I've never been more serious in my life." The meeting continued. Questions, constraints, negotiation attempts. Rowan answered them all, but he never moved from the center of his decision. When it ended, Nothing was fully resolved, but something was. Rowan walked out of the boardroom into the elevator alone for a moment. City reflected in the mirrored walls. His phone buzzed again. He didn't check it. He only thought of Ivy's quiet question, Ren's moon cup, and the way the backpack leaned against a chair leg instead of being locked in a child's arms. He pressed the elevator button, breathing slow, steady. Then he went home. Rowan returned after dusk. Rain had come back softly, tapping at the windows like fingers asking permission to enter. The house glowed warm from within, lights low and steady, as if it had been waiting patiently. He stepped inside quietly, not wanting to startle them. In the living room, Ren sat on the rug with a set of colored pencils spread out like treasures. She was drawing a circle, perfectly careful, then another. But this time she added a small door at the bottom of one circle, then 2 windows. She looked up when she heard Rowan. "You came back," she said, not accusing, not surprised, just noting a fact. "I did," Rowan replied, voice gentle. On the couch, Ivy sat cross-legged, book open but unread. The backpack rested beside her, close but not held. Her gaze lifted slowly to Rowan's face, searching for what meetings did to people. Rowan offered her the only thing she trusted: consistency. "I'm here," he said. Ivy nodded once. Then she looked back down at her book, pretending she was reading, giving herself time to feel safe without showing it. Marin had left earlier after checking on them, and the house had settled into a quiet rhythm. Dinner waited covered on the counter. Nothing fancy. Just warm food, small choices, no pressure. Rowan washed his hands and joined them on the floor, not on the couch, keeping himself in their world, instead of making them climb into his. Ren scooted closer. "Was the meeting loud? It tried to be?" Rowan said. Ren considered that seriously. "Did it win?" Rowan smiled faintly. "No." Ren nodded, satisfied. Ivy's voice came quietly, almost from nowhere. "People wanted you to change your mind." Rowan didn't lie. "Some did. And you didn't." "No," Rowan said. "I don't change my mind about keeping you safe." Ivy stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes weren't dramatic. They were precise, like she was inspecting a bridge before stepping onto it. Then she asked the question beneath the question. "What if they make you choose?" Rowan's throat tightened. He answered carefully, not in grand speeches, but in a sentence built to hold a child's heart. "Then I choose you," he said. Ren's face softened instantly, relief washing through her like warmth. Ivy didn't react right away. She looked down at her hands, then at the backpack, then back at Rowan. Slowly, so slowly, it felt like time was giving her room. Ivy reached over and nudged the backpack closer to Rowan's side of the couch. It wasn't a gift. It was permission. Rowan didn't touch it. He just let it sit there, respected, present, safe. Later, when it was time for bed, Rowan walked them upstairs. Ren climbed into her bed without hesitation, now star nightlight glowing beside her. Ivy paused at her doorway, scanning the room in that familiar way, door-window light. Rowan stayed in the hall, giving space. Ivy spoke without turning around. "If I fall asleep, will you still be here in the morning?" Rowan answered without a pause. "Every morning." Ren, already tucked in, mumbled sleepily. "Even if it rains." "Even if it rains," Rowan said softly. Ivy nodded once, then climbed into bed. She placed the backpack beside her pillow, not under her arms. Her hand rested on it lightly. Habit, not fear. Rowan turned off the overhead light, leaving only the nightlight stars. At the doorway, he hesitated. Not because he wanted to leave, because he wanted to stay long enough to make sure they believed he meant it. Downstairs, his phone buzzed again. Messages, waiting, questions, waiting, consequences, waiting. Rowan ignored them. He stood in the quiet hall and listened to 2 small breaths settle into steady sleep. Not guarded, not rushed, just safe. And in that calm, Rowan understood something that no board meeting could teach. A house doesn't become a home because it's expensive. It becomes a home because it does not disappear. Morning arrived without announcement. Light slipped through the curtains in thin, patient lines. The house didn't rush them awake. It waited. Ivy opened her eyes first. For a moment, instinct pulled her body tight, then she remembered. The room was still the same. The nightlight had dimmed, but not disappeared. The backpack rested beside her pillow exactly where she had left it. She breathed. Down the hall, Wren padded softly into the kitchen, socks, mismatched hair tangled with sleep. She climbed onto a chair without asking, feet swinging above the floor. Rowan stood at the stove, quiet, unhurried. "You're up," he said, not surprised. Wren nodded. The house didn't make noises. Rowan smiled. It usually doesn't. Ivy appeared in the doorway, watching. Rowan noticed immediately not her presence, but her pause. "I'm here," he said gently before she could ask. She nodded once and stepped inside. Breakfast was simple. Toast, fruit, choices offered without pressure. Ivy ate slowly, no longer counting bites, no longer saving half. Wren hummed softly, a tune with no words. Later, Marin arrived with paperwork and calm energy. She explained next steps clearly, nothing immediate, nothing sudden. Stability first, time second. Ivy listened, then asked, "Do we have to leave today?" Marin shook her head. "No." Rowan added, steady as ever, "You're staying." Ivy absorbed that like a fact, not a hope. She picked up the backpack, then set it down again by the chair, not on her lap. A small change. A permanent one. The headlines softened after a week. Questions remained, but urgency faded. The board approved Rowan's reforms, quietly aid programs, restored response times, guaranteed oversight added. No speeches, no campaigns. Rowan kept his word. There were no photos of the girls. No interviews that mentioned their names. Their story wasn't leverage, it was private. At home, routines formed. Wren learned where the extra blankets lived. Ivy learned that doors closed at night on purpose and opened again in the morning. One afternoon, Ivy sat at the table with a pencil and paper. She drew carefully. Not circles this time. A house, 2 windows, 1 door, a small blue rectangle beside it. Rowan passed by and stopped. "Is that the backpack?" Ivy nodded. "It can stay outside sometimes." Rowan crouched beside her. "Only if you want, I want," she said. "I know where it is." That evening, as Rowan tucked them in, Wren asked, "Are we in trouble?" For before Rowan shook his head. "You weren't in trouble. You were waiting." Ivy thought about that. "We don't wait like that anymore." No, Rowan agreed. "You don't." Later, Ivy placed the backpack at the foot of her bed instead of beside her pillow. Her hand hovered for a second, then fell back to the blanket. Rowan watched from the doorway, heart steady. The house didn't disappear. Neither did he. Weeks passed. The question Ivy once whispered no longer lived on her lips. It surfaced sometimes in the way she checked locks or lined up her shoes, but it no longer ruled her. One clear afternoon, Rowan found the girls in the backyard. Wren lay on the grass, tracing cloud shapes. Ivy sat cross-legged with the backpack open beside her. Inside were crayons, a book, and a folded letter wrapped carefully in tissue. "Did Mom know?" Ivy asked, suddenly, eyes on the sky. "That we'd be okay?" Rowan sat beside her. He didn't rush the answer. "I think she hoped," he said honestly. "And sometimes hope is enough to get us to the next place." Ivy considered that. Then she leaned against his arm, not clinging, just resting. That night, Rowan turned off the light and paused at the doorway. Ivy spoke softly, not looking at him. "I know where we belong now." He waited. "Here," she said. "With you." Rowan felt the truth of it settle, not like a victory, not like relief, but like alignment. A child does not belong to systems. A child does not belong to money. A child belongs where she is chosen and where she is allowed to stay. Under a ceiling of quiet stars, 2 sisters slept, without guarding their hearts, and the house at last held them. Did this story move your soul? Share your feelings in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Click the end screen to watch another heartfelt video. See you in the next story.